Imagine a political idea, one that's really woven into the American story. It says something like, real America is Christian America.
Right, and if we lose power, not just the nation, but the faith itself is in danger.
It's such a powerful claim. But what if that very idea, that political theory, actually ends up harming both the country and the church it claims to be protecting?
And that is the essential insight we are deep diving into today. We're looking at the work of Paul D. Miller, specifically his book, The Religion of American Greatness.
And Miller is coming from an interesting perspective. He's a conservative, a veteran.
Exactly. Someone deeply committed to the nation. And he's analyzing this movement, often called Christian nationalism, not as just some cultural vibe, but as a defined political philosophy.
So our mission today is to pull out the key insights you need to understand how all these things, nationalism, faith, and American democracy, really intersect.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The term Christian nationalism is everywhere now. But if it isn't just, patriotism or loving your country, what is it?
Well, Miller's first big insight is that it is, by its very design, an illiberal political theory.
Illiberal. What does he mean by that exactly?
He argues that it tries to define America by a very specific, and I'd say narrow cultural heritage, historically white, Protestant, European, and it wants to give that group cultural preference.
So it's illiberal because it clashes with the whole American experiment.
It clashes with our constitutional commitment to equal citizenship for everyone, no matter their faith or background. It's a theory that puts cultural dominance ahead of the rule of law.
But doesn't every group try to assert some influence? I mean, where does Miller draw that line between, say, normal political advocacy and this illiberal theory you're talking about?
He draws the line where you stop defending universal principles and start demanding special preference. The moment a movement treats minority rights or the rule of law as secondary to getting a specific cultural outcome.
That's the breaking point.
That's when it undermines the whole system. So for you, the listener, it raises a really immediate question. Can a movement that wants cultural preference coexist with a constitutional order that's built on religious freedom for all?
Which I think sets up his second big point perfectly. We have to be able to tell the difference between healthy patriotism and this hungry nationalism.
Absolutely.
Yep.
He says patriotism is about gratitude, service, a kind of critical loyalty.
Meaning you can love your country enough to criticize its failures.
Yes, exactly. Like slavery or racism.
Yeah.
Nationalism is different. He calls it hungry. It treats the nation as this sacred object that has to be defended at all costs, usually from outsiders or elites.
And Christian nationalism, in this view, just baptizes that hunger.
It takes a universal faith and turns it into a tribal badge for one group, one nation. It's a really powerful point coming from Miller because it shows that deep patriotism and tough criticism can and should go hand in hand.
It really models that.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, you have to ask yourself, how does your own community remember its history? Do you celebrate the ideals and confront the failures? Or is any criticism seen as a betrayal?
That's a good metric. And it leads right to the theological argument, his third insight. We hear this a lot, the idea that America is a new Israel, a nation uniquely chosen by God.
Miller says that reading is just. Well, it's biblically unsustainable. Ancient Israel had a very specific, unique role in redemptive history that no modern country can claim.
So the New Testament changes the focus.
Completely. The focus is on a church that is transnational, drawn from every tribe and every language, tying the fate of Christianity to the political success of just one country. It really distorts that global mission.
And if you reframe it like that, it changes everything about how you engage in politics. It kind of diffuses the whole apocalyptic culture war tone.
It does. The nation becomes just one mission field among many. It's not the promised land itself.
So what's the path forward then? Where does Miller leave us?
He argues for what he calls a better story than nationalism, something like open exceptionalism. And it requires a good dose of what's called Niebuhrian humility.
Okay, wait. Let's break that down. For anyone who isn't familiar with Reinhold Niebuhr, what does Niebuhrian humility mean in simple terms?
It just means recognizing that every single nation, including the U.S., is flawed. It's touched by human sin, so you can never, ever equate it with the kingdom of God.
It's a kind of political self-skepticism.
A healthy skepticism, yes. A story that admits our achievements but also faces our history of injustice without pretending we're somehow morally superior.
So the goal isn't winning a culture war, but contributing to a flawed republic.
It absolutely is. And that brings us to a final thought for you to take away from all this. Mull this over. If the church really is global first, how does that change Christian engagement in local and national politics? And what are the real-world policy risks when we treat any modern nation as a new Israel in God's plan?